Movement is life. If you get overwhelmed by life and you just never move, you're just going to die where you are. They may not physically die, but you're going to die on the inside because it's going to suck the life out of your soul.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Casassa, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with a SEAL. Today's guest was a Navy SEAL for 26 years and cultivated a powerful mindset. As a SEAL, he was a sniper instructor. Today, he is an author, speaker, and business leadership advisor. With his extensive experience in mindset and leadership, I am so excited to have him on the show. So without any further introduction, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited to introduce you to William Branum. William, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me on here. I'm stoked to be here.
Oh, I'm excited to talk to you. I did a lot of research about you. First of all, I just want to say your TED Talk was really good. And for anyone that's listening, should really go and listen to it because I definitely want to talk about that later on into the show. You said some really amazing things. I want to talk about your background a little bit. If you can just start there in terms of why you wanted to become a SEAL and the gates you had to go through to, get there.
I grew up in Mississippi. Little town outside of Meridian, Mississippi, Collinsville, Mississippi. There's not a lot that happens out there. There's not even a stoplight in the town. So that's how small of a town it is. I was poor, like dirt poor, like free lunches, kind of poor. My dad was in the Navy. My grandfather was, every man in my family was in the Navy, and I swore that I would never join the Navy. I was heavily involved in the Boy Scouts. I learned somewhere along the lines to stop saying never. I was heavily involved in the Boy Scouts. I became an Eagle Scout. The troop that I was a part of, they sent me out on the National Jamboree, where I met another kid who he had his whole life sort of mapped out. He's like, I'm going to graduate high school. I'm going to go to the Naval Academy. I'm going to become a Navy SEAL, and I'm going to fly F-14 Tomcats like the movie Top Gun. I'm like, that's cool. I want to do that. What is a Navy SEAL? And he was like, oh, it's the hardest military training in the world. They jump out of airplanes, they blow stuff up, they shoot guns, they stick around, they scuba dive, they do all these other things. I'm like, that's what I want to do. Where do I sign? In Fort A.P. Hill, Virginia, at this jamboree. I leave, I come back home. Probably a week later, the Navy recruiter calls my house. And this was the summer between my 11th and 12th grade of high school. They just have a list of, kids that are getting ready to, go into the 12th grade of high school. And then they're trying to recruit them into the military. And so the guy calls me, he's like, hey man, have you ever thought about joining the Navy? And I swear if he had called me before I went to that national jamboree, I would have said, not on your life. But I said, yeah, actually I was thinking about going to the Naval Academy, flying F-14 Tomcats and becoming a Navy SEAL. He was like, you know what? I just might have a program for you. So why don't you come on down here to the recruiting station and let's have a conversation. I went down there. I watched the really cheesy recruiting video of with some really bad CGI and some other stuff. And I was like, yep, that's what I want to do. Where do I sign? And they're like, hold on, you got to do all these other things. So I joined the Navy in the delayed entry program before my 12th grade of high school. And so basically I joined the Navy and I was just waiting to graduate to go off to boot camp. And so I graduated, went off to boot camp about 6 weeks after I graduated high school. I went and took the SEAL screening test. I failed it the first time I took it. What I realized is my mindset was not in the right place. Like a super valuable lesson is, I was looking at the minimum standard to become a SEAL, like the minimum number of push-ups, sit-ups, run, swim, pull-ups, things like that. I was like, I can do the minimum. And I got there, I did the swim, I did the push-ups, and I think it was like 52 was the minimum number of push-ups, which I laugh at the number now. And I think I got to maybe 37. And I was like, really? That's terrible. So I went back, I licked my wounds, and I was like, I'm gonna get in better shape, and I'm gonna, after boot camp, and then go take the screening test again. So after boot camp, I went to Gunner's Mate A School, which is in the Navy, you have to have a Navy job to advance. And so now you don't. You can just be a SEAL and advance through that rank. I had to become a Gunner's Mate first. So I went to breakfast every morning, got a couple little boxes of cereal and some other snacks. I skipped lunch and I worked out every day at lunch with guys that also wanted to become SEALs. And so we just did push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups all through lunch. And I should have gone and taken the screening test then, but I was like, we're getting ready to graduate. I was high enough in the class. And so I picked some orders to go to another school for 4 more months in Virginia Beach that happened to be at Dam Neck, which there may or may not be a SEAL team on that base. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to this school, get in better shape, and then I'm going to go to Buds. But what I didn't know is because I took that school for 4 more months, I had 24 months of obligated service to a ship in Yokosuka, Japan. So I go to take the test there in Virginia, and they're like, okay, awesome, let's go get you signed up. Then they realize that I can't go to BUD/S. I have to go be on this ship. And I was like, well, what if I quit? What if I fail out of the school? They're like, you're still going to that ship in Japan. I'm not a quitter. So I graduated. I went to Japan. I did my time. And when it was time for me to get my next set of orders, I called my SEAL detailer or my gunner's mate detailer, the guy who they call them flesh peddlers, because their job is to just put bodies in billets. And so I was like, hey, Chief, I'm going to submit a package to go to BUD/S. I want to become a Navy SEAL. Just letting you know, I'm giving you a courtesy phone call. He was like, that's great that you want to become a Navy SEAL, but I'm not going to let you go because that school that you went to in Virginia Beach, that made you so critical to the Navy that more critical than becoming a Navy SEAL. And I'm trying to use logic here. And I'm like, well, why is the reenlistment bonus to be this gunner's mate job that I'm doing like $4,000 to reenlist for 4 years, or as a SEAL it's $20,000? Like, that logic doesn't make any sense. You're not going to become a Navy SEAL. Don't call again. And I was like, well, that's not going to work for me. So I went and took the screening test. I did all the stuff. I failed it the second time also. So I took the screening test the second time in Japan with, 10 other guys. I beat everyone on every single event. I was the only guy screening to become a SEAL. Everyone else was either trying to become an EOD guy or a Navy diver. I beat everyone on the swim, the push-ups, the pull-ups, the sit-ups, and the run. But what happened on the run is I came across the finish line, and the standards to become a SEAL are, the test is the same, but the standards are harder to become a SEAL. Even though I beat everyone on everything, I missed the run by like 12 seconds because everyone else is running in like shorts and sneakers. I'm running in like long pants and heavy boots. I still beat everyone. I come across the line 12 seconds too slow. So therefore I failed it for the second time. So I had to go take it a third time. This time I passed it, no problem. Every time I failed the screening test was a lesson that I learned. I learned that, you know what? It's not over till it's over. Or you can't shoot for the minimum standard. You have to like destroy the standard. And there were all these little lessons that I learned along the way. I submit my package. I'm ready to go to BUD/S. I'm just waiting for orders, and I get letters of recommendation from other SEALs. As a matter of fact, I'm moving out of my place here in Hawaii, and I found an old business card for the SEAL commander that was stationed in Japan on the USS Blue Ridge, who wrote me a letter of recommendation to go to BUD/S, but my detailer still would not let me go. And so I'm probably maybe 6 weeks out before, my orders on the ship are up. And the chief of naval operations comes to my ship in Yokosuka, Japan. Guys are like, why don't you ask the CNO if he will let you go to BUD/S? Because he's a common sense leader, all these other things. His name was Admiral Borda. He also started what was called the SEAL, the Seaman to Admiral program. So he came in as like a lowly enlisted guy, and he became the highest ranking person in the military or in the Navy. He comes to my ship in Yokosuka, Japan. He doesn't go to any other ship. Here's my vision of the Navy. This is what's going on. This is, does anyone have any questions? And I raised my hand. I was the second person he called. And I said, yes, sir. I joined the Navy to become a Navy SEAL. I think I deserve a chance to go. My detailer won't let me go. He says I'm too critical. I think I deserve a chance to go. What do you think? He turns to my commanding officer and he's like, well, is he a good guy? And he was like, yeah, he was a sailor of the quarter this quarter. CNO turns back to me and he says, well, you'll be in the first class after your PRD, which is planned rotational date. After that, the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, the most senior enlisted guy in the Navy, comes down. He was like, I tried it. It wasn't for me. The easy part's done. Now go out and make us proud. And so I called Washington that night, which is where the SEAL detailers were. And I was like, hey, have you heard anything about my orders? And they're like, what's your name? Last name Branum. It's like, yeah, we mailed your orders out this morning. Now, this was before the internets, before Al Gore invented the internets. They made some phone calls, sent some facts. And again, I was in Japan and the detailers were in Washington, D.C. And it was just a matter of like a few hours where they had already called back, got me orders, and my orders were in the mail on the way to Japan for me to go to BUD/S. And they're like, you'll be in the first class. And 6 weeks later, I'm off to California to start my SEAL career. So I showed up to BUD/S, immediately realized that I suck at running, at least running on soft sand. I still passed everything, but then I got hurt and I got rolled out of the first class that I was going to be in. And I rolled into the next class. I got injured again. And then they're going to kick me out. They're like, clearly you didn't plan well enough. You didn't work out, whatever. So I go to the first guy who says, we're going to kick you out because you didn't plan well enough. I go to the second guy and I'm just a mess. I'm on my crutches. I'm like snot bubbles, tears, the whole thing. I tell him the whole story about the CNO. I'm like, if I leave, I may never get a chance to come back. The guy says, go stand outside. I watched my class come in from the beach. They're all wet and sandy and gross. And all I can think is, I want to be with you guys. I want to be with those guys. I want to be wet and miserable. And I want it to suck. And that is why I'm here. And like, I never should have gone to medical. I should have just limped my way through. And then the guy comes back like 4 hours later. And he was like, what are you doing out here standing in front of my office? I said, you told me to stand outside and wait for you to come back. And so he went and did a whole bunch of meetings, and he was like, go check in and heal up and be in the next class. I went to the next class. I still didn't heal up. I eventually made it through Hell Week. I was limping along all the way through. I made it through Hell Week, where I learned a bunch of like super valuable lessons. And then because I was limping on one leg, I had stress fractures in the other leg. Then they rolled me again to class 208, where I finally graduated. But yeah, I was afraid I was going to get kicked out. But because I made it through that major like milestone in Buds, which was Hell Week, they're like, okay, you can stay. We're not going to kick you out. But I was living in fear pretty much the entire time until I finally eventually graduated.
Before I ask you the question on what lessons you learned in Hell Week, because you just said I learned a bunch of valuable lessons, and I can't let that sentence go. But I want to ask you, for yourself, where you just mentioned about the standards, right? How you were going for the minimum. I just know from experience through training. And like you said, soft sand is a totally different beast. Running in general, or, doing push-ups and sit-ups and all that stuff, just to get to a higher number does take a lot of work, like you have to put it in. And even like shaving like 5 seconds off a run is, wow, that's a lot. What do you say to like those people that are training and are seeing small numbers, or maybe they're not seeing the results that they want? Because I know that this was something that I struggled with.
So the second time that I failed the screening test, it was because I was so far ahead of everyone else. I just sort of coasted like maybe the last quarter mile. I was very capable of doing it. I was just like, oh, I got this in the bag. That was the mistake. I got this in the bag. It's not over until it's over. As far as learning to run on soft sand, I actually learned to run on the soft sand while I was injured the first time. So they wouldn't let us just sit around and like lick our wounds. They still made you go out and like work out and things like that twice a day while you're in this sort of holding facility. But, I'm on my crutches, and they're like, okay, you gimpy dudes, go over there and like walk in circles or jog in circles or do whatever. And so I'm on my crutches. I'm feeling how the sand feels under my feet, and how can I move my feet to disturb the sand as little as possible. It's very different from running on like hard pack, because if you run like on either like hard sand or on like a sidewalk or whatever, the ground does not give away, but the ground gives way when you're walking on sand. So I had to learn how to like basically touch the sand and pick my feet up very quickly instead of trying to push off, because the sand, it basically dissipates all of your energy behind you. And so you lose all of that momentum. And so I had to learn a different way to move. But if you're training and you're trying to get ahead and you're just trying to shave some seconds off of a run or try to add a few more push-ups, volume is the thing that's going to get you where you need to go, to get you where you want to do. It's really about putting in the reps. And that's what I was doing when I was broken and gimping around on crutches in the soft sand. I was still putting the reps in and learning like the details of it. I was paying attention to the details of how to run or how to move on soft sand. And I still know how to do it today. And I actually apply that same technique to running on like a regular road. And then later on, like, I don't know, probably 15 years ago in the SEAL teams, there was this thing called pose running. I think it was maybe CrossFit founded or something like that. And I realized that that's very, very similar to the way that I was running on the soft sand. Like when I apply that to running on like a regular surface, it's a much more efficient, and you can basically, you spend more time with your legs moving and less time like pushing. It's lots of little steps instead of taking big steps that take more energy to do. And actually, I hiked the Grand Canyon last year? Last year twice. And what I found is taking those little tiny little baby steps more often will get you where you want to go a lot faster than trying to take big steps that require a lot more energy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Now, let's revisit the question on what you mentioned. You said you learned a lot of valuable lessons in Hell Week.
Yeah. So one of the big lessons is I learned that I have a lot more in the tank than what I think I do. It doesn't matter how much it sucked. The first lesson I learned is I wanted to be surrounded by winners. And so we started Hell Week. A lot of crazy stuff happened. And I saw one boat crew that was winning all the races. Boat crew, it's 7 guys. You carry these stupid boats around on your head and all that stuff. You all become bald by, 2 weeks after Hell Week because it just rubs all your hair off, and mine never grew back. And so I was like, I'm like, those guys are winning. I want to see who's in that boat crew. I want to be surrounded by those guys. And because the guys in my boat crew, they were quitting. They didn't want to put out. They didn't want to try to win the races. I'm like, I want to win. I'm trying to like get through this program. Monday afternoon before dinner, we had lost enough people. They had to reshuffle the boat crews. And so I'm like, I'm going to get into boat crew 3 because I kept hearing their number winning. I'm like, I'm going to get in boat crew 3. We line up. You're in a height line. It's all based on how tall you are because you don't want someone who's like 6'6" and someone who's 5'4" on the same boat because the guy that's 5'4" is never going to touch the boat, and the guy that's 6'6" he's just going to have a broken neck the whole time. So everyone's about the same height. So I'm like everyone's lining up, and I'm kind of going slow, being very methodical. I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's boat crew 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Boat crew 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll be number 5. I'll be in boat crew 3. And if I'm not quite tall enough, I'll pile some sand under my feet to make sure that I'm tall enough. I was tall enough, but just, I'm playing the game. And when I got in that boat crew, I realized that there were no superstars in that boat crew. Everyone just had this uncommon desire to succeed. They wanted to win. I mean, there were some good guys in there, but there were no like superstars. They weren't like great at everything. And so I get in that boat crew, and I'm running along, and I'm like, my stomach hurts, and my legs hurt, and my back hurts, and my neck hurts, and my head hurts. And I'm like, and I want to slow down. But the other guys are not slowing down. They're speeding up. They're going faster. And anytime there was a gap between the boat that was in, it didn't matter what we were doing. Everything we did to win. Not once in Hell Week or any other time did we ever talk about this. Not once. It was just an unspoken rule that we are going to win. And like there was just the culture in the boat crew was like, we're going to win no matter what. If there's a gap between the boat that's in front of us and the boat that's in front of them, we're going to pass them and get between and fill that gap. And we did that. It didn't matter if we were like doing an actual race or we're just going to eat breakfast. We won everything. If we started in the back, we always finished in the front. So you always have more in the tank than you think you do. You can push through a lot more stuff than you think you can. The other thing that I realized was Hell Week sucks. You have two choices in Hell Week. You can choose to keep going or you can quit. That's choice number 1. Choice number 2 is if you decide to keep going, you can choose to be mediocre or you can choose to be awesome. Choose to be awesome. It sucks no matter what. You can suck in the back or you can suck in the front. I'd rather suck in the front and be done a lot quicker. So it sucks. So those are a couple lessons right there.
I want to fast forward a bit. This is a little bit more personal, this question. It's from one of the interviews I heard. I want to ask you, when something traumatic happens in your life, like your dad taking his life 6 months after you graduated from BUD/S.
You have done a lot of research on me.
A lot of interviews. The mission has to continue, right? You have teammates, you have people that are counting on you, but you also have to take care of yourself, right? And deal with it. But then sometimes we compartmentalize, right? And then for yourself, I wasn't sure if maybe, because we're going to talk about your transition and all that stuff, but how does one and what did you do for when you have something so traumatic happen to you and you still have to continue and go on?
So the way that I even found out about my dad was they didn't tell me that he took his own life. They said he died in a car accident. The truth was they found him in his car. And then when I finally, I drove to Mississippi, I was like sad and whatever. And I got there and then I don't even remember who told me or how it was told to me that he took his own life. I was like, whoa, that doesn't make any sense. So now I'm like, what happened? Like we're finally I didn't have a great relationship with my dad growing up. He was very much like lead with a hammer. Now that I was in the military and I was doing, sort of some of these higher level, more elite things, he was like, we started to have a relationship. We started talking and communicating. And I was super grateful for that. And then all of a sudden he's gone. And then I found out he took his own life. I'm like, what the hell? So now I'm like digging through all of his papers and I'm just trying to figure out what the heck happened. Why did you do this? Why did you leave me? We're finally having a relationship. It took a lot of mental work to figure, to try and rationalize, why did he do this? What happened? In the teams, I lost a lot of teammates in combat and some in training, some to suicide. Learning how to deal with that stuff was not an easy thing to do. It's still very hard. And I'm still, I still struggle with some things. Like when I've, hear that someone lost their life or took their life or whatever, I'm like, it hurts my soul a little bit. I see suicide as, the people who take their own life, I think they see it as they're trying to do everyone else a favor. Like they feel worthless or something like that. And that's the most selfish thing that you can do is to take your own life because you're just going to leave a mess for everyone else.
What are some coping skills that you have or that have worked for you or that you could share with others that are going through traumatic situations?
I like to compartmentalize stuff. It works for a while, but the more stuff that you shove in there, you can only handle so much of it. So what I've found now, and one of the reasons that we had to move the clock is now I've found that like talk therapy is something that actually works pretty well for me. It's not right for everyone. It wasn't right. It wasn't always right for me. I certainly wasn't going to talk to anyone or share with anyone. So what I found is you have to find people that you trust. I've been a part of some men's personal development programs, and I've found men in there that I trust explicitly. Like I'll never share like things that I've shared with them, I would never share with anyone else, to include a therapist. So it's sometimes it's just finding the right people that you can trust, that you can go to. Like I'm not going to go to a significant other and share some of the stuff that I have. Fall very heavily on the masculine side versus the feminine side.
Mm-hmm.
And so the job of the masculine is really to be that protector, to create that safe space. I can't go to someone who I'm supposed to be that protector and then give them all of my crap. Like now they're like, oh, well, I can barely handle it. I certainly can't pass it on to someone else. So I have to find someone who can handle my stuff with me or for me or around me or whatever. And so I think finding the right people that you trust, and be very careful with who you trust to share those things with. I think those are some of the coping, and it took me a long time to figure that out.
It's interesting that you say that because I know a lot of guys in special forces that say what you say. It's like, I'm not going to share some stuff with my significant other because I'm the protector, right? It's like, I have to put it on me. Like she can share as much as she wants because my job is to protect and listen and, and help in any way. But her job it's not the same. So that
No,
was
not at all.
very, yeah.
And then
So,
they want you to share. They're like, share. I'm like, oh, you know what? You get just the tip. I'm going to give you just the tip. Pun
very
intended.
relatable. Very relatable. So I want to talk about, now I'm going to ask you about the TED Talk because you talked about, I want to talk about that transition point because, you said that was like your hardest military mission ever, right? Transitioning. And I said this a couple of times on the show. I said, transitioning in any point in life is important, scary. Scary is the best word to say, and it's like anyone that's going into middle school or high school, that's a transition period, right? Going into college, retirement, switching careers, like all these things. And for you, SEAL for 26 years, that's your identity, right? And not to
100%.
mention, it's a totally different world. It's like, you're a complete alien in the civilian world because we operate way differently than you guys operate. And we have totally different mindsets. And I want to talk about what I thought was really interesting that I really want you to talk about on the show was the dirt dive that you talked about on your TED Talk, because you talked about that's where the magic happened. And you gave a example when you were doing it on a mission, but can you give like a different one so when people go listen to the TED Talk, they don't hear the,
Yeah. So the one that I did on the TED Talk was about a combat dive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where we are around the world. So the way that we prepare for a mission is we do all these workups and then we go deploy, and then we have a mission that we're like, here, we have a target, go do this thing. So what we do is create the plan, and then we brief it to the men, all the enablers, we brief it to the headquarters, we brief it to everyone so everyone knows what the mission is going to be, what we're going to go do. And then what we do is we go outside and we grab our radios, our headsets, we pull up the Humvees or whatever vehicles we're taking. We all get in the vehicles exactly where we're going to sit on the mission that night. And then we practice passing the pro words that we're going to pass over the radio so that everyone knows where we are. And we kind of talk through, like when we pass, alpha, 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 it means this, or bravo, bravo, or whatever the thing is. And that also lets us know in the vehicle where we are on the way to the target. So we'll drive the vehicles like maybe 10, 15 yards, 20 yards, and then we'll practice we'll stop them. We'll pass the word of getting out of the vehicle. We'll get out of the vehicle. We'll line up in a line. It's very, very elementary, very basic. just like we're going to do at night. But if you don't practice it in the daytime with no equipment, no danger, no nothing, you're definitely going to mess it up at night. So we get in a line and we practice walking to, like, we may have a pile of dirt or some pallets or something that demonstrate like the target area. And we walk up just like we're going to in order to that target area. And then we say, okay, break. And then the security elements go and stand in their position that they're going to stand. And the assault force goes and kind of stands on the pallets. We don't actually clear buildings or anything like that. Pass the next word. And then the vehicles come up and they position themselves as if they were positioning themselves on the target. And then we go through, what the calls that we're going to make on the target as if we're talking back to the headquarters, passing everything over the radio again so everyone can hear it. We talk through contingencies. What if? We poke holes in the plan. Well, what if this happens? Then we're going to do this. What if that happens? Okay, we're going to do this. And so we have a good idea if things go badly, what we're going to do. Then we practice getting a head count before we get back in the vehicles. So we practice everyone get in nice little straight lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or whatever the number is that we're working in little small teams so that we can see, because sometimes we rotate people in and out of different positions so that if I'm in charge of, this group of 4 dudes, I know who they are. I know that I have 4 dudes and, we all have, and we can have that communication prior to going out on the mission. And then we practice the vehicles getting back in a line just like they're going to leave, and then we get back in the vehicles and we sit exactly where we're going to sit, like where we sat, on the mission on the way in, get a head count before we leave, and then we drive back and again we finish the dirt dive and we talk about it after we finish the dirt dive. Like, what about if this happens? What if that happens? So we continue to go over contingencies, but we practice everything in the daytime where things are simple. No one's shooting at you, no one's trying to kill you, no one's whatever. It's not hard right now. We can solve the problem right now while it's easy. And then when we go do the mission and things do go sideways, we've already talked about the contingencies. Everyone has reviewed the contingencies. And so we know about what we're going to do, even if things go really, really badly. We lose people, whatever happens, we still have an idea of what we're going to do and how to do it. So if you don't do this dirt dive prior to the mission, and it doesn't matter what you're doing in life, if you're transitioning between one job or the other, or getting married, getting divorced, getting whatever, having a kid, if you go into that with a plan and you practice doing that plan, it doesn't matter how bad things happen. You're much more able to respond to those bad things that happen because you've already practiced sort of this plan.
How we can take the stress out of the life transition, because it's going to be stressful either way for us, like in terms of our emotions. Sometimes our emotions are just going to be there because we are getting out of our security, into something that is completely unknown, and nothing in life is guaranteed. Even if it is there is no 100% chance, because you could get taken out of something could happen, right? So can you talk further about making that transition and to, I guess, through the fear?
Anytime you're doing something new, it's going to be scary. And what most people do is nothing, because they don't know what to do. They don't know where to go, which direction to go. I tell people I don't care which direction you go. Just start moving in a direction. For example, in a gunfight, if the enemy ambushes you, they're probably going to ambush you in a scenario where they have the advantage. And so they're going to do it in such a way so that you're pinned down, you can't move, you can't go anywhere, or you're scared because they're shooting at you, or maybe you've lost some people or whatever. And most people, that fight or flight, well, there's freeze that falls in there also. Freeze, fight or flight. Most people revert to freeze. I don't know what to do. This is scary. Transition. I don't know where to go. It doesn't matter what you do. You just have to keep moving. I teach a leadership course out in California called the SEAL Leadership Challenge, and I use close quarters combat as one of the tools to teach leadership. And it's really about moving and maneuvering, and as you maneuver on the battlefield or through the room or through the building, your perspective changes. But if you sit still, your perspective is never going to change. It's going to stay exactly the way it is. When you maneuver on the battlefield, your perspective changes. Like, you see your team, the terrain, the enemy from this perspective, but when you move, 50 yards to the left or right, you're going to see the whole battlefield from a different perspective. Same thing happens in life. If you start taking action, I don't care what the action is, just start taking some action and start moving. Your perspective of the world of your life is going to change a little bit. It's going to change. Sometimes it'll change a lot. And so what a lot of guys do when they're doing this close quarters combat, they come into the room, they stay in what we call the fatal funnel. They stay right in front of the doorway. So we found through training and in combat that about 2 feet inside the doorway is where 90% of the bullets land. Guys and girls, they'll come in, they'll go into the room, and they'll stop pretty much in the doorway or like 1 foot inside the doorway. And I'm like, why did you stop there? Why didn't you keep moving? Well, I was in the room and I didn't know, I got overwhelmed. Like, okay, well, don't stop right there because this is the worst place that you could stop. In a gunfight, if you stay where you are, the enemy, and you don't move, then the enemy is they're going to outmaneuver you because you're not maneuvering, and then you're just going to die. Movement is life. I like using the analogy of 2 bodies of water. If let's say you're out in the wilderness somewhere and you're dehydrated and you're dying of thirst, and you come across 2 bodies of water. On one side you have, sort of a stagnant pond and it smells terrible, and it's just the water's just still and not moving. And on the other side you have like a babbling brook. Which side are you more likely to drink from? The stagnant water or the moving water?
The moving water.
Why?
I don't know. Maybe the stagnant water.
No, you were correct. Well, because the moving water, the movement is life.
Right.
The moving water, there's probably dead stuff and bacteria and terrible things in the stagnant water. I would never drink from stagnant water if I did not have all the proper filtration and to be able to kill everything that's in there. The moving water is much more likely to be cleaner water for you to drink from. Movement is life. So the same thing happens. If you get overwhelmed by life and you just never move, you're just going to die where you are. You may die on the inside. And they may not physically die, but you're going to die on the inside because it's going to suck the life out of your soul. So I just tell people to move. I don't care what direction you move. The more you move, the more you'll see what happens in these life transitions. You'll be able to see the world from a different scenario, from a different perspective. You'll see your situation from a different perspective. You start taking big movements in life. And the more you move, you may say, this is not the direction I want to go. Then you can change the direction and find out where you actually do want to go. But if you stay still, you're never going to improve anything in your life. You're just going to die stagnant in that, sort of swampy water of death.
So you talked about shooting, and as a sniper instructor, what were some of the biggest lessons that you've learned that translate well in the civilian world?
One of the biggest was to make bold adjustments. Everyone talks about, you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, is trying to shave seconds off of a run or something like that. Sometimes that sounds like incremental changes. And everyone talks about doing these incremental changes. Well, one of the things that I learned teaching sniper school and then going back to the platoon and helping guys re-sight in their guns and things like that, we oftentimes think of doing things in incremental movements. Guys will maybe their impacts are landing on the left side of the paper and they keep doing 2 or 3 or 4 clicks on their optic and it just doesn't move. And they'll, turn back to me like, hey, my thing isn't moving. It's not adjusting. My bullets are just not moving towards the bullseye. And I'll come over and I'll just do these really terrible, just overdo the windage or whatever, the movement, the direction that they want to move their impacts. And they're like, dude, you just broke my gun. I'm going to be shooting off the paper on the other side. And I'm like, just do me a favor and go ahead and take a few shots. And what happens is their impacts move all the way across the paper, across the bullseye, but this time they're much closer to the bullseye than where they were. And had I not come over there and made these just incredible changes to their life, almost like doing the wrong thing, almost doing the opposite thing, then they're able to make the minor adjustments to get actually into the bullseye. But I had to make these major adjustments, these bold adjustments to move the impacts across the paper. Then they can make the micro adjustments to put them back into the bullseye. I was on a call with a coaching client who's a coach for a hockey team. And he was talking about the things that he was doing with his team, they seemed right. They seemed logical. They seemed like the conventional way of doing things. And I just told him to do you know what, take all that logic. What I want you to do is I want you to take your best players and I want you to bench them. And I want you to put your B and C team in there first. And then when he did that, it had such an impact on his A team players that they were like, what I feel like, because they were choking going out the gate. They're like, they kind of felt entitled. Because they're the senior guys or the best players, but they weren't playing like they were the best players. And so when I told him to put his junior players in, his less good players in, and those guys started winning, it motivated the other players. They dropped their entitlement, they dropped all that other stuff. It just leveled the whole team up to a higher level. I had him do things like they all, they're hockey stick. I've never played hockey. I could barely ice skate, but I know that the concept of it. and they hold the stick a certain way. I'm like, you know what? In practice, have everyone hold the stick the wrong way. So if they're right-handed, hold it as if they're left-handed. The whole practice for the whole week, you can only play left-handed. That doesn't make them better right-handed, but actually it does. Do the opposite of whatever you're doing. And so some of those lessons of making these bold adjustments in your life to your optic or whatever it is, if you want to make a real change in your life, do make bold adjustments. Don't just make these incremental minor adjustments, because you're never going to get anywhere.
I feel a lot easier when you have a team with you. You're doing it together. You're all uncomfortable together. Now, what do you have for us that might not have a team, right? And we want to make a bold adjustment in our life, and we go that way, but how do we stick with it and stick with the uncomfortable to know that it's the right or the better choice? I don't like to use the right, but the better choice for us to move in the direction we want to go.
I would argue that we all have a team. They might not be, like we show up together and go to work together, but we all have a team. We all have people that we have in our life. We surround ourselves with people. Everything is a relationship. Whether it's a romantic relationship or a family relationship or a friend relationship or business relationship, they're all relationships. So all those people that you allow in your life that you keep close to you, they're all part of your team. They may not be doing business with you or something else, but they're all part of your team and they're part of your support network. Go to those people and have them hold you accountable. Now, I would only do that with people that I trust. Kind of going back to the TED Talk where I talk about, I like to give, when I'm doing a briefing my plan of what I'm going to do, I like to bring in the haters, the naysayers, the people who don't believe in me. I like to bring them in because they're going to see a different perspective. They're going to see things that I'm blinded by because I can't see it. And they'll tell me why it's not going to work. I love that because I never would have known that or thought about that had they not been there, had they not been around, had they not given me that different perspective. I'm like, oh, that was awesome. Thank you so much for that input. So even the haters I like to have on my team, in the SEAL team, we like, even the most junior guy gets a vote. Come up with the most audacious, like ridiculous, like scenario that could go poorly for us. So for example, my buddy Rob O'Neill, who killed bin Laden, he was talking one time about when they were planning that mission. He's like, the most junior guy on the team was like, hey, what happens if a helicopter crashes in the courtyard of the compound that we're going in? And they're like, that's never going to happen, but you know what? We should probably plan for that. And what happened? A helicopter crashed in the courtyard because the newest guy, the most unlikely scenario happened. They were able to handle that situation.
Segueing in, well, I'm going to say transitioning to this next part, I wanted to ask you, can you talk about why being vulnerable is a key to success?
Being vulnerable, it forces you to ask for help, because I know me, and I don't like to ask for help. I hate asking for help. And one of the things that I remember, it was, you remember the app Clubhouse that came out right when the pandemic and all that other stuff? And they're like, this is the next thing, blah, 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 whatever. And so I was like, I'm trying to build a brand over here. I'm trying to figure stuff out. So I'll get on there. I got on there with a buddy, and I got into a room, and there was a psychologist or psychiatrist. I don't know the difference between the two. And I was like, I'll go. And I was like, you know what? I hate asking for help, but I'm sure I should probably do it more. And she was like, okay, well, let me ask you this question. How do you feel when other people ask you for help and then you provide them that help? I was like, oh, I feel like amazing. I love helping other people. And she was like, well, why are you robbing other people of that joy? And I was like, I can't talk to you anymore. You just hurt my feelings. But being vulnerable and asking other people for help, you're empowering your network. You're empowering other people, which actually helps you at the end of the day. It helps you become a better person, a better whatever it is that you're trying to do, because they may turn into someone that you can actually trust and actually go to in the future. And that's the only way that you can kind of test the waters. Now, I wouldn't go to someone who wasn't sure if I trusted and like ask them for the moon, but I'm going to ask them for something that I think that they might be able to help me with. Let's see how that whole scenario goes. Can I ask them for something else? Is there something that I can do for them? And this is, really building the relationship, building the camaraderie, building the trust, building all those other things.
I want to go back to transition, that point in your life where you left and, went into the civilian, where you became a civilian.
Right.
Like you said, hardest transition for you, right? and you were drinking heavily. You were drinking yourself to sleep. How does one pull themselves out of a dark place to, you know, to be better for, and I think I also heard you in an episode talk about like how you're much fitter now than you were as a SEAL. So talk to us about that and that transition for you.
No one can do it for you. You have to want to get better. I knew I wanted to get better. I knew I wasn't living my purpose. I wasn't living up to my very own personal standards. But I was also feeling sorry for myself. So the first thing I had to do is stop feeling sorry for myself and have the desire to get better. No one can get better unless they want to get better. Remember that whole like, I don't want to move. I don't want to like change. I don't want like, so if I stayed that way, I would certainly not be on a call with you right now. I would not be here. I would be, who knows where I would be. Would not be where I am today. That's the first thing is you have to want to get better. And then once you want to get better, then you just have to start taking whatever actions. You just have to start moving. Doesn't matter where you go. Again, doesn't matter what direction you go, just start moving in a direction. For me, CBD was a modality that helped me drink less. It helped turn down some of that noise in my head. That's why I started my company, Naked Warrior Recovery. Then I started figuring out like, what is my purpose now? What's my new mission? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Again, starting that business helped me figure some of that stuff out. The things that I do now, and I kind of alluded this to earlier in the show, is everything that I do now are all things I swore I would never do. I swore I would never be in sales. I sell CBD. I sell all kind of stuff because I always thought sales were sleazy, and they're absolutely not. They're just providing value to someone in exchange for dollars, or they could be exchanged for relationships. Like sales is not sleazy. There are sleazy people that do sales, but sales is not sleazy. I swore I'd never be one of those like life coach, Tony Robbins wannabe, whatever people. Well, it turns out that I actually am pretty good at that thing, business leadership, whatever. It all comes back to like fixing the person or helping the person fix themselves so that they can actually lead or go where they want to go and become the person they actually want to become. And I swore I'd never be one of those guys that are standing on stage going rah, rah, rah. Well, I stand on stage and I go rah, rah, rah. And I found that I'm pretty good at it. But it took a lot of practice to get there. Again, I swore I would never do those things. I do all of those things. So I have stopped saying I will never do anything because I may get another thing on my plate. And I'm like, my plate's pretty full right now.
When I was actually listening to an interview, you mentioned how like CBD for you was, you had a notion about it. It's kind of like people are told like red meat's bad for you, right? And then right. Or like kale's good for you, or kale's bad for you. You don't know what to believe, right? It's just like what you end up believing, right? And then that becomes an absolute. How do you change a belief that was once an absolute, and especially like in the beginning, like it feels good, right? And you're like, I think this is good for me because it feels good. But in subconsciously, you still have that program that you've been playing for years and years, or you've been, programmed by the environment that you were in.
Right. Well, I was in the beginning, I was terrified to try it because I still had a top secret clearance. I was still in the military. I was still whatever. Mm-hmm. And, it comes from the cannabis plant. So I'm like, oh, drugs are bad. I'm probably not going to do that. That's a great way to not get a retirement. So I still didn't try it until probably a year after I retired. And I was like, okay, well, I think maybe now. And the only reason that I tried it is because a buddy of mine gave me a bottle that he was like a, kind of Instagram influencer. He was also in my very first SEAL platoon, gave me a bottle. And I'm like, I'll try it because I think that maybe it'll be good for me. And I did. And I didn't notice anything. Maybe I slept a little bit better. Maybe I was a little less pissed off during the day or whatever. And then I ran out of that bottle. But what I did notice is that things that stopped bothering me started bothering me again. Pains that I stopped having or they were less bad were really bad again. And so I was like, well, maybe CBD was the thing. I don't know. So I tried a different brand. I had very similar results. And I'm like, well, I think this is it. But kind of going back to your actual question is if there are these absolutes in your life and you want to see if they're actually absolute or not, go try it out. What do you have to lose? As long as it's like legal, moral and ethical, go try it. Go do it. Who cares? If it doesn't work, if you prove me wrong or prove me right. Don't listen to someone else. Don't listen to the narrative that you're hearing on social media or the media or whatever. Go figure it out for yourself. Go do your own research. Prove me wrong or prove me right. Either way, I don't care. I don't care if you prove me wrong. Good. You learned something. Or you prove me right. Good, you learned something. Awesome. I don't have to be right. I have to be right for me, not right for anyone else. You have to be right for you, not for anyone else. But don't go in blind. Don't go don't be a lemming. Don't just follow the crowd. Go do your own research. Go do your own thing. Go out there and fail. And, you can be afraid that people are going to make fun of you or whatever. One of the most, I think, impactful things that anyone ever said to me, or not, they didn't actually say to me, it was in a book that I read by Tim Grover. He said, you need to flex your id-gaf muscle. Id-gaf stands for I don't give a fuck what other people think. So the more that you can flex your id-gaf muscle, the better.
I like that. That was really cool.
I wish I had come up with that, but I have to give it to him.
So let me ask you, what can we do, us listeners, on a daily basis to get mentally fit?
I would say you have to get naked. So this is my main keynote that I give. This is what I call the Navy SEAL mindset, or 5 secrets to help you think like a Navy SEAL. And so naked is an acronym. And so N stands for never quit. And I don't mean never quit smoking or drinking or anything like that. I mean never quit on yourself. Like if you make a promise to yourself, you keep that promise. Or maybe you make it this big audacious goal. Keep the goal. Like maybe it's just so overwhelming. Chop that thing up into teeny tiny pieces and attack one of those things a day, or 10 of those things a day, until you get to the end. That's what never quit really is all about. A is accept failure. N is never quit. A is accept failure. Failure has been the biggest teacher of my life. I have learned more through failure than I have through success. I like to hurry up and get to failure so I know where my limits are, so I can start pushing those limits and get even better. In buds, you're guaranteed to fail every single day, multiple times a day. So just apply that to your life. I expect to fail. I saw a quote one time. What would you do if you knew you could never fail? What would you do? That's a great question to continue to ask yourself. The K is kill mediocrity, because you know what? We get sucked into this thing. It's scrolling, social media, finding excuses to not attack our goals for the day. And why? Just go work out. Go do the things that you're supposed to do. Keep those promises to yourself. Don't allow yourself to be mediocre. And I say the way that you kill mediocrity is you start off by competing. Compete in kindness. Compete in generosity. Can you be the kindest person? Compete in gratitude. I learned a few years ago that gratitude was a superpower. So every day when I get up, I write down 5 things that I'm grateful for. 4 of those things are super easy. 4 of those things are like my health, my family, my fitness, or whatever, like opportunities. One of the things, the 5th thing that I always write down is something that has brought me great pain. And when you can be grateful for one of the things that bring you great pain. For example, I'm currently in a lawsuit with another company, with a supplements company that uses the word naked. They have a bunch of trademarks and they're suing me for using the word naked in Naked Warrior Recovery. I'm like, okay, let's go. First, I was like, I don't have time or money or the attention. Like, I don't want to deal with this stupid lawsuit because it's frivolous and it doesn't mean anything. You're this multi-million-dollar supplements company coming after a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business whose mission is to end veteran suicide. Really? Okay, let's go. I'm grateful for that opportunity. So N is never quit. A is accept failure. K is to kill mediocrity. E is expose your fears. Fear controls our life. So when we're able to expose our fears, one of my, a good friend of mine, he was also a business coach. He took a company that was doing $300 million a year, barely breaking even. And in 5 years, he sold it for $3.4 billion with a B. You know, one of the things that he would say, and this kind of goes back to kind of talk therapy or things like that. He would say, fear does not exist on paper. And so when he would have these crazy, overwhelming things, he would just write down everything that's bothering him on a piece of paper so he could see it. He's exposing it to the world. And then he would read it back to himself. He's like, really? That's the thing that's bothering me? That's the thing that fear is controlling me? Mark Twain once said that fear is the mastery of fear. It is not the absence of fear. So if you want to live a life free of fear, you have to learn how to control the fear, or so that the fear will no longer control you. And the D is to do the work. So it's never quit, accept failure, kill mediocrity, expose your fears, and do the work. And you have to do the work every single day. So that's what you have to do.
What a keynote. That is really, really great.
You got about an hour keynote in 3 minutes.
Yeah. That was fantastic. Wow. That's life-changing right there. Thank you so much for that. And thanks for being on the show. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Yes, ma'am. This has been a pleasure.
Everyone that's listening, please like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Substack member so you get free chapters from the book and a bunch of other mindset tools to help you elevate your life. It's all completely free. I will see you guys all next week. Thank you.